Israel that were very swampy and infested with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. And so a lot of the places here in the Galilee, because this area receives plenty of rain, it became very swampy and infested with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. And so when the Jews started to come back in the 1800s, the first thing that they wanted to do was to drain the land. And to drain the land, they planted the eucalyptus trees. Because the eucalyptus trees have a great capacity of absorbing a lot of water, and it has a smell that is very repelling to the mosquitoes. So where did the mosquitoes go?
Philippines!
To the Philippines!
That's not biblical, huh?
But actually, I always say, and the mosquitoes went to Egypt. I just say Egypt, but when it's a Filipino group, it is to the Philippines. Okay, so they're not there. So there are less mosquitoes here now. And so these eucalyptus trees, whenever you see eucalyptus trees, that means to say that this place used to be very swampy and infested with malaria-carrying mosquitoes. He was talking with Elijah and Moses. And who is Elijah? The prophet. And who is Moses?
The lawgiver.
Moses represents the law, and Elijah represents the prophets. The law and the prophets. The law and the prophets. Jesus said, I did not come to destroy the law and the prophets, but I have come to fulfill them. At the time when they were here, they were telling Jesus what's gonna happen to him. So it's actually, in effect, they're actually encouraging him. Because on the way, Jesus was already on his way to Jerusalem. And he was telling, Moses and Elijah were telling him, very soon, you will be heading to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, you would be handed to criminals. And they would crucify you over there. And so they were telling Jesus what was awaiting him in Jerusalem. And then so while he was speaking with both of them, Peter saw Jesus transfigured and also and he exclaimed, Lord, let us stay here. It's good to be here. Let's build about 3 tents, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. And while he was speaking, the Father spoke from the cloud, and he said, this is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Now, in this particular place, first of all, this is our first stop. We're going to be going to visit the church itself. And Jesus knew the kind of death that he would have in Jerusalem. And yet it says in the Bible, he set his head like a flint towards Jerusalem. He knew he's going to die in Jerusalem, but he was obedient to the will of the Father. And the Father is very pleased with the obedience of the Son. Kaya hindi siya nagano. He cannot keep quiet in heaven. He said, anak ko ito. This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. If there is anything that pleases God, is our obedience, even if it meant suffering awaits us. Even if it meant that suffering awaits us, then our obedience to the Father is so pleasing to Him, just like Jesus. Now today, as we go inside the church, I think there is something that we would ask the Lord, Lord, that I may see you. That I may see you more in my life. That I may see your hand in my life, Lord. Because there's a lot of times that maybe we are missing yet the target, right? We're not yet living fully what God intends for us to live. And so we'll ask the Lord today, right here at the place of the Transfiguration, that I may see you more. And also there is something that the Father said, listen to Him, that I may also hear your voice. We'll ask that from the Lord as this is a pilgrimage. The Lord is very strongly present in our midst. He is right here with us. And as you seek Him, then He will show you, and then you will hear His voice. But there is something that Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall
Inherit.
see God. So there is a way to seeing God, is by having a pure heart. So we ask the Lord also here, Mount Tabor, Lord, purify me. Take anything that blinds me or that deafens me, that I would not hear your voice. Purify me, that I may see you more. And so today, I'm glad that we will have a chance to have Mass here. We'll take that time to pray, that we will, that the Lord would open our eyes, that we may see Him more, and that we may hear Him more. Now, the church itself is a beautiful church. This church was built by the Italian architect whose name is Barlucci. Try to remember his name because most of the churches here in the Holy Land were built by Barlucci. And then there are 3 places that we're going to be visiting inside the church. The main altar. Right at the main altar, underneath the altar, close to the altar, there is a covered glass place there. According to tradition, that's the place where Jesus was transfigured. If there is no Mass going on right now, we'll go there first so that we can touch that area. We cannot touch the stone itself, but we can at least take that picture. Remember I told you about the picture of that, the risen Lord like this? If you take a picture at a certain angle, you can see His image standing this way right on the rock itself. So we'll take a picture of that. I hope that there is no Mass, and I hope that we get the Mass scheduled over there. Okay, then after that, on the left side over here is the Chapel of Moses, and then on the other side is the Chapel of Elijah. Okay, so now we can go inside. Dito tayo sa Moses Chapel. The Chapel of Elijah. See, it's good that it was mentioned about Elijah. Elijah never died. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a chariot of fire. But Moses died. And that's why it's a good point that Bobit made today, that there is eternal life. That there is life after death. Moses is an example of it. Now, here we are in the Chapel of Elijah. First of all, during the days of Elijah, there was a certain king whose name is King Ahab. his name is King Ahab, he fell in love with a woman who is not from here, from Tyre and Sidon, which is now the present-day Lebanon. And her name is Jezebel. So King Ahab married Jezebel, and Jezebel brought with her the pagan worship of Baal. Yes. Now Baal was considered to be the god of fertility and also the god of agriculture. Since most of the people of Israel were farmers, they started to turn away from the living God to Baal. They turned to Baal as the god that would make sure that there would be rain so that they would have a good harvest. And so as the people's hearts turned away from God and they started worshiping Baal, that Baal would be the one to send the rain so that they would have a good harvest. Our God is a very jealous God. What did he do? He closed the heavens. And so there was no rain for 3.5 years. There was no rain for 3.5 years. While people were looking to Baal as the one to send the rain, God closed the heavens for 3.5 years. And there was a man at that time whose name is Elijah. He was a prophet. He was a man with a zeal and passion for God. I like his spirit. And so he was actually disturbed by the fact that the people of Israel were not worshiping the living God of Israel, but instead was worshiping this Baal. Moses was a little boy, but an infant. Remember during the days of Pharaoh, Pharaoh ordered that all Hebrew boys would be killed. As soon as the baby is born, it should be killed. And Moses' mother hid him in a basket right by the Nile River. And so Moses means drawn out of the water. And that's actually the meaning of Moses. When Moses is drawn out of the water, the daughter of the Pharaoh found him right among the reeds. And so Moses grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh. And so for 40 years he was there, growing up in the house of the Pharaoh. And then he knew that he is not an Egyptian. He knew he is a Hebrew. And he knew also that there are Hebrew slaves in Egypt. And so one day he decided to visit them. He visited them where they were working, and he saw that there was an Egyptian man and a Hebrew man that's having an argument. And so what did Moses do? He killed the Egyptian man. Ano may problema si Moses? He has a problem with his temper. He has a problem with his temper. He killed the Egyptian man. And then the next time around, he visited again the Hebrew slaves, and he saw that there were two Hebrew men having an argument. And so he tried to settle the argument between the two of them. And then one of the Hebrew men says, "Are you acting as a judge with us? I saw you when you killed the Egyptian. I will tell the Pharaoh about you." And he did tell the Pharaoh about Moses, and so Moses fled Egypt. He left Egypt and he ended up in Midian. And there in Midian, he was taking care, he was a shepherd, from the house of the Pharaoh to out in the field in the wilderness, taking care of sheep and goats. And he was there in the desert of Midian for 40 years. And while he was taking care of the sheep and goats in the desert, the Lord appeared to him in a burning bush and said to him, "Moses, take off your sandals because you are standing on holy ground." And then God said to him, "Moses, I want you to go back to Egypt. I heard the cries of the Israelites under the hands of that Pharaoh, and I want you to go back to Egypt and tell the Pharaoh, set my people free." And how did Moses answer? He probably answered this way. And then, but Lord, I cannot speak. Do you know that He was a man of slow speech, it says in the Bible. He could not speak fluently, and yet of all people, God chose Moses. God chose Moses to lead the children of Israel out of Egypt. He went. And as we know from the Bible, they crossed the Red Sea. He led the children of Israel out of Egypt, crossed the Red Sea, and they're supposed to reach the promised land within 40 days. But how many years did they wander around the desert?
40
years.
years.
40 years. Why 40 years? Why? Because they kept murmuring.
Grumbling.
Grumbling. Grumbling, murmuring and grumbling in the desert. So God allowed them to wander in the desert for 40 years instead of just 40 days. Now, all the stories in the Bible are not just stories. We have something to learn. We have something to learn. If we keep on grumbling, the blessing that God has for you now will have to wait until you learn how to be grateful. Now, what is the antidote for grumbling, for murmuring? Remembering. If we remember all the blessings that God gives us, then we cannot murmur against Him. As long as we remember the good things that God has given us, we cannot murmur against Him. Imagine the children of Israel. They crossed the Red Sea on dry land, and that's a big miracle, but they forgot. That's why they murmured. The key to blessing is a grateful heart. If you keep on murmuring, the antidote to murmuring is actually remembering. And so they wandered in the desert for 40 years. And what did they murmur about, complain about? There's no water. Moses, there's no water here. And so they complained to Moses. And what did Moses do when people complained to him? He turned to God. He spoke to God. He told them the problems. It's the same thing with us. When the Lord sends people to you and they're complaining about life, pray for them. Turn to God. Moses turned to God and God gave him the solution. God said to Moses, strike the rock once and water would come out. And he struck the rock once and water came out. And so the solution came. But then the children of Israel forgot again what God can do in the desert. So they complained again to Moses. They complained again to Moses, where is the water? And so Moses turned to God, and God said to Moses, speak to the rock, and water would come out. And so when he came back to the people were complaining a lot, and Moses got upset. He lost his temper again. He lost his temper, so instead of speaking to the rock, he hit the rock twice. Water still came out, but Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land. Now, again, we have to learn something from Moses. Pag masyadong mainit ang ulo natin. When we lose our temper, sometimes the thing that we already have, we lose it. Sometimes marriages break up because of that. Sometimes we lose our jobs because of that. Sa init ang ulo. So Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land. He saw the promised land only from Mount Nebo. He viewed the promised land, but he was never allowed to enter the promised land. And so so we learned something from Moses. Now, as far as Moses is concerned, we remember him going up Mount Sinai. And it says in the Bible that he is the meekest man on earth that saw God face to face, and he did not die. And Moses was face to face with God. Yes, Father, thank you. And he received the 10 Commandments written by God on 2 tablets of stone. When he came down from Mount Sinai, his face was glowing. Because he was face to face with God, then the glory of God was upon his face. It's not the same as with Jesus. Jesus was transfigured, but it's from within. Whereas this one is just the reflection of the glory of God on his face. When he came down, he saw that the children of Israel already was worshiping the golden calf. So he got upset. What did he do? He threw down the 2 tablets of stone. And he had to go up again that mountain. And he spent again another 40 days and 40 nights with the Lord. And then he came down with the 2 tablets of stone. Okay, so now we see here Moses, during his growing up days in Egypt at the house of the Pharaoh, 40 years. And then he went to Midian, another 40 years. And then they wandered around in the desert for 40 years. And so he finally died in Mount Nebo at age 120. 120, that's why we always say here in Judaism, here in Israel, may you be blessed up to 120.